Throughout history, some deaths have done more than end lives. They've ignited revolutions, toppled empires, and shaken the very foundations of religion, science, and power. Welcome to the most impactful executions in history. A countdown of the moments where the blade, the rope, or the flame didn't just silence a voice. It changed the world. We begin at number 10, with a man whose death lit the fire of modern thought. In 1600, Giordano Bruno was marched into Rome's Campo dei Fiori, shackled and defiant. His crime? Believing the universe was infinite, and that other worlds, even alien life, might exist. To the Roman Inquisition, these ideas weren't just dangerous, they were heresy. Bruno was a former Dominican friar turned philosopher, whose radical views challenged both Catholic dogma and the limits of human imagination. He rejected the geocentric model, questioned church authority, and embraced a cosmos far beyond comprehension. For that, he was burned alive, tongue-tied to silence him as the flames rose. But his death did the opposite of what his executioners intended. Bruno became a martyr for science, reason, and intellectual freedom. His ideas echoed into the Enlightenment, setting the stage for thinkers like Galileo, Newton, and beyond. One man burned, and the stars got a little closer. And that's just the beginning. History's most impactful executions, number 9. Thomas Cromwell rose from a blacksmith's son to the right hand of King Henry VIII. Brilliant, ruthless, and utterly indispensable, he engineered Henry's break with the Catholic Church, orchestrated the king's marriage to Anne Boleyn, and masterminded the destruction of England's monasteries. But power under Henry was like dancing on a knife's edge. Cromwell's final misstep? Arranging a political marriage between the king and Anne of Cleves. Henry found her hideous and was humiliated. Enemies pounced. Accused of treason and heresy, Cromwell was arrested without trial, stripped of titles and dragged to the block. On July 28, 1540, his head fell, the same day Henry married his 5th wife. Cromwell's execution halted the Reformation's radical wing and plunged the Tudor court into a new era of paranoia and bloodshed. His fall proved no one, not even the king's most loyal servant, was safe from the axe. History's most impactful executions, number 8. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, in a dim basement in Yekaterinburg, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 loyal servants were lined up and shot. The Romanovs, once the most powerful royal family in the world, were executed by Bolsheviks as civil war tore through Russia. There was no trial, no last rites, just bullets, bayonets, and silence. Their deaths weren't just the end of a dynasty. They were a signal to the world. The old order was dead, and revolution had won. The Soviet Union would rise from their blood, an empire built on ashes, ideology, and terror. The execution of the Romanovs didn't just shake Russia, it reshaped the global balance of power for the entire 20th century. And it all began in that basement. Most impactful executions, number 7. In 1305, Scottish freedom fighter William Wallace, hero of the Battle of Stirling Bridge, was betrayed, captured, and delivered into English hands. King Edward wanted to make an example of him. Wallace was stripped, chained, and dragged through the streets of London, accused of treason, against a king he never recognized. His sentence? Hanged, drawn, and quartered. One of the most brutal executions ever devised. They meant to break his body and erase his cause. But Wallace didn't beg. He didn't plead. He shouted, "Freedom!" His death didn't kill the rebellion. It fueled it. Wallace became a martyr, his courage echoing through Scottish uprisings for centuries. Today, he's not remembered as a traitor, but as a legend, a national symbol, and a warning to tyrants. You can cut a man down, but not the idea he dies for. Most impactful execution, number 6. He was called the Incorruptible, the man who once demanded liberty, equality, and fraternity until fear, paranoia, and power led him to drown France in blood. Maximilien Robespierre rose from obscurity to become the face of the French Revolution. He sent thousands to the guillotine, aristocrats, priests, friends, even allies, all in the name of virtue. But as the reign of terror spiraled out of control, the blade Robespierre once commanded began to turn. On July 27, 1794, he was arrested by the very revolutionaries he'd once led. The next day, he was dragged to the scaffold with half his jaw shattered. He died the way he'd killed so many beneath the guillotine. His death ended the terror and marked a turning point in the revolution. The people had finally turned on their executioner. Robespierre's fall was proof. When revolutions eat their own, No one is safe, not even the architect of the blade. Most impactful executions, number 5. She was once the most powerful woman in France, Marie Antoinette, queen of opulence, excess, and scandal. But in 1793, the tides of revolution swept her from Versailles to a filthy prison cell. Her husband, King Louis XVI, had already lost his head. Now it was her turn. At 5 a.m. on October 16th, she was awakened, dressed in a plain white gown, and placed in a cart, not a carriage. She rode through a silent, seething Paris, once adored, now despised. Before the guillotine, she stepped on her executioner's foot and whispered, "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." The blade fell, and with it, over 1,000 years of monarchy began to crumble. Her death marked the final break with the Ancien Régime and symbolized the people's victory over privilege. But it also deepened the chaos, spiraling France into the darkest days of the revolution. The Queen became a ghost, and France would never be the same. Most impactful executions, number 4. Kings weren't supposed to die like this. On January 30th, 1649, King Charles I of England stepped onto a scaffold outside Whitehall. Calm, poised, ready, he had ruled by divine right, ignored Parliament, and plunged the nation into civil war. But now, that same Parliament had tried and condemned him for treason against his own people. It was the first time in history a reigning monarch had been legally executed by his own government. Charles wore 2 shirts, so he wouldn't shiver in the cold and appear afraid. He knelt, said a final prayer, and with one swing of the axe, the world changed. His death shattered the myth of divine monarchy and proved that a king could be held accountable by law, by parliament, by people. In the chaos that followed, England became a republic for a time. But the idea that no one is above the law never died. Charles didn't just lose his crown, he redrew the boundary between power and the people forever. Most impactful executions, number 3. She was just 17, a peasant girl who claimed to hear the voices of saints. In the chaos of the 100 Years' War, Joan of Arc convinced the French crown to give her command of an army, something unheard of for a woman, let alone a teenager. She won battles that seasoned generals couldn't. She lifted the siege of Orléans, revived French morale, and helped crown Charles VII as king. But her rise made her dangerous. Captured by the Burgundians, sold to the English, and put on trial for heresy and cross-dressing, Joan never denied her visions. On May 30th, 1431, at the age of 19, she was tied to a stake in Rouen and burned alive before a crowd. Witnesses said she called on Jesus with her final breath. Her death turned her into a martyr, and within decades, she was cleared of all charges. Nearly 500 years later, she was made a saint. Joan of Arc's execution didn't just kill a girl, it immortalized a legend and gave France a national hero whose flame still burns. Most impactful executions, number 2. In ancient Athens, questioning authority could make you a legend or get you killed. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, spent his life asking uncomfortable questions, forcing people to examine their morals, their politics, and themselves. But in 399 BCE, Athens was still reeling from war and political unrest. Socrates' relentless questioning was seen as dangerous. He was accused of corrupting the youth and impiety, not worshipping the city's gods. The jury found him guilty. His sentence? Death by drinking a cup of poison hemlock. Offered a chance to escape, Socrates refused. He believed that obeying the law, even when unjust, was part of living a moral life. Surrounded by friends, he drank the hemlock calmly, discussing the immortality of the soul until he could no longer speak. His final words were to request an offering to Asclepius, the god of healing, perhaps a hint that death, to him, was a cure for life's trials. Socrates' execution didn't end his influence, it cemented it. His student Plato recorded his ideas, ensuring his philosophy would shape the world for millennia. Most impactful executions were one. 2,000 years ago, in a small Roman province, a teacher from Nazareth was brought before both religious leaders and imperial power. His name was Jesus, hailed by some as the Messiah, accused by others of blasphemy and sedition. Rome saw him as a potential threat to stability. The Jewish council saw him as a dangerous disruptor of their authority. Though the governor, Pontius Pilate, declared, "I find no fault in him," political pressure sealed his fate. He was beaten, mocked, crowned with thorns, and nailed to a Roman cross, a punishment reserved for the worst criminals. Yet the charges didn't match the crime. Jesus claimed to be more than a moral teacher. He claimed to be the Son of God, come to give his life as a ransom for many. The scriptures say that his death was no accident, but the fulfillment of God's plan, that the sinless one would bear the penalty for sinners, so that those who repent and trust in him could be forgiven and reconciled to God. 3 days after his burial, his followers claimed he had risen from the dead, and their unshakable conviction ignited a movement that has shaped nations, laws, and lives for over 2 millennia. Whether you believe in him or not, history cannot deny this truth. The execution of Jesus of Nazareth altered the course of the world, and, according to his own words, the eternal destiny of all who believe.